letting people find their way in. We have like 30 plus of us joining now live. About almost 300 people, Leah, actually, eventually signed up. So
Wow.
a recording will go out. Oh, if you're not muted, we're going to ask you to mute, and I might just go through and mute one of you because it gives that feedback, which is not good. 1 second.
Hello.
Somebody. Trying to see who isn't unmuted. Oh, I see it is. There you go. Okay.
Sorry, I've just on a Zoom. Yes, so
It's all good. Okay. There we go. Now we got through the little moment of people coming in. People are still coming in. Well, welcome everybody. My name is John Woolstone. Most of you probably know who I am. And I'm really excited to be sitting here with Leah De Abati, who is my therapist and a guide, teacher, mentor in my life. We have so much that we want to get into, but before we get into the interview section of why we're here, Leah and I were just talking, and she had this really great idea of perhaps starting us with just a bit of a practice to land us into the experience of what we're here to really discuss. And so we're coming from a more grounded and open place. So Leah, I'm just going to pass it straight to you, and you can guide us.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel super honored and grateful to be in this conversation with you, specifically today, but also, in the larger arc of our work together. And part of what I thought would be helpful for me and for you and the space between us and for everyone that's listening and witnessing is to actually just land into our bodies and specifically into our hearts. There's something that I work with quite frequently that's often a way of starting out as a resource, which is about finding what I call a resource refuge. And for me, my heart is the place I go when I want to land and when I want to listen in a good way. And so I'm just going to suggest that we all take a moment to bring our attention in. I call it two eyes in, and orient toward the felt sense of love in your body. And we can just start with the heart experience, which is essentially has an electromagnetic field 5,000 times that of the brain. Many people don't know that, but it's like a saucer of concentric circles of energy that is just like waiting to hold the brain space. And so if you imagine, if you just bring your awareness into your mind's eye, two eyes into your heart space. Your heart is just left of center, nestled between your lungs, massaged by every breath. And just to sort of get a sense of what's happening there when you really bring your attention in your mind's eye there. Take a few breaths and notice what it's like to be in that energy. To feel the three-dimensionality of this organ, this incredibly powerful organ that has the capacity to entrain anything in its midst. And to see if you can feel that, the throb at the base of the exhale. I often use the adage, locate in order to relate. And this is the place where I go when I want to locate inside of myself so that I can really be in a place of with myself and with you at the same time. So just feeling into what is the felt sense of my heart, my experience of my heart right now. And staying in description if you can. It's hot, it's throbbing, it's open, it's warm, it's expansive. So just noticing your descriptors for your heart experience right now. And then slowly in your own time, and really feeling into what's my own time. That's a great question. Coming to a place of eyes open, which is what I call one eye in, one eye out. Not two eyes popped out to the universe at the expense of yourself, but actually, I'm going to have an oscillating touchstone into self, out to other,
This is
into
your
self, out
therapist?
to other, so that your experience of your being here is connected, anchored in your location inside your body. And then we get to be with other, with the experience we're in right now, with the conversation, and that you get to actually be oscillating into yourself in this like buzz of yes and here and here in this oscillation. I get to come back to myself and participate from that place. Yeah, so I think I'll hand it over to you, John.
Mm. Architecture. Yeah, fears of grief and joy and just, I don't know, the feeling of pinching myself of like, how am I so blessed to have found you into my life?
Hmm.
Um, it's been, I've had some hard years the past like 5 years, and it's been getting, I've been on a path of something, evolution or stabilizing, don't want to say that word too loud. And just to have, have some hard turns and then have some good ones coming, including really finding you. I feel really so blessed and a certain faith. And thank you for guiding us through that. And I'm just brought back to that time in our session that I wrote about in the essay that prompted, I think, this us being here now, and just the exquisite way that I was able to go somewhere very deep, and just the such gentleness of integration that you guided me out of it with by doing that kind of practice, but even slower. It was so exquisite, and just how important that is. I know that integration is such a buzzword in the collective right now for all kinds of experiences, and it's so beautiful to have that integration practice started up front. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Johanna, who just popped on with our dear elder Sage. And I know you, Leah, because of Johanna. So thank you, Johanna, for bringing Leah to me and just the wild dance we've all been in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I feel, to kind of orient everybody else again, welcome. I'm John Wolfstone. This is Leah de Abati, who I'm going to read a bio from and introduce more properly in a moment. We're here in Boulder County, Colorado, on the territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. people want to throw in the chat where you're coming from on planet Earth. I'm always curious because I know there's such a global audience of people that, yeah, are following my work and willing to be in this dance with us. And yeah, I also want to take a moment as people are tuning in, just gonna light a candle for myself. I feel maybe more nervous than I ever have in doing an interview, even though I've done this hundreds of times over the past decade plus as a filmmaker and now a transmedia human storyteller. And this a little simple ritual is going to help me ground here. So yeah, just noticing my own breath, feeling that heart field, electromagnetic concentric rings, as you named it, bringing flame to this wick. Yeah, and you said something earlier about just love and the radicalness of love as a therapist. So in honor of that,
In honor of that,
love is still so radical and needed. Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Leah. Loving people coming from all over the world, in the Pueblo land, UK, Oslo, wow, Canada, a lot of people from Canada and Europe, wow, Austria, Wales. Thank you, everybody. We're so looking forward to being here and having you be in this dialogue with us. So, okay, who am I talking to? Who am I interviewing now? This is Leah De Abati, MA, LPC, BC, DMT, and ACS, which maybe you'll explain at some point, or I will now in this bio. Leah runs a full-time private psychotherapy practice that is bursting at the seams, I would say, from people that want to be in this magic. She's a licensed professional counselor, LPC, a board-certified dance movement therapist, that's the BCDMT, an approved clinical supervisor, ACS, and a somatic psychotherapist who works with individuals and couples and offers clinical supervision and consultation. Leah's been doing this for 30 years in all kinds of realms, from addiction to recovery and trauma and grief and loss and relationship and soul actualization. And in addition to her private practice, Leah has worked in wellness clinics, mental health centers. She also spent 9 years as the academic advisor and the admissions coordinator and faculty for the Masters of Arts of Somatic Counseling Psychology program and on their leadership team at Naropa University. For those of you that don't know, Naropa is a very famous alternative university here in Boulder, Colorado. And Leah, it seems like you were pretty instrumental in supporting others really walking this path of somatic psychotherapy in the way that you serve there. Leah's also been, you've also been a therapeutic consultant and senior support team for Golden Bridge, which is a dance community through Melissa Michaels, which is how many people I know you as well, where I often see you on Sundays, holding it down, being a therapeutic resource for people at dance. And you are a dancer yourself and a maker, and you have a passion for soulful beauty. And I'm gonna go right now, and people, I'm gonna put a link in the chat. So I will do this at the end, which is a little form Leah created where you can sign up to hear about future offerings of hers and follow her work. I recommend you save that link and do it now, so have that out of the way. So Leah, this talk wanted to be called Love in the Void, Relational Fulfillment Amidst a Legacy of Trauma. And I'm really excited to get into some aspects of your story and how you got here. But first, I actually want to tug on something that you said when you and me were checking in for the few minutes prior to starting this, which you were saying something like love, like leading with love or touching love or working with love is a pretty radical thing for a therapist to do. And there's part of that that makes a lot of sense. And part of me is like, but isn't that what it's supposed to be about? So I'm just curious,
Right.
like what
Right.
what did you mean by like that? How is love radical, and how does it inform the way that you do lead your life and practice and just humanity?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. So I think what I said was that I use that I've come to sort of talk about one of the more prominent skills that I use in my work is love. And to call love a clinical skill is kind of rogue and radical. And not because it's not happening on some level all the time, but to actually get really invested in learning about, understanding, teaching, and being responsible around it. And I think one of the things that I said was that, and I can speak to what's, had me sort of arrive here in this love conversation, this love as a clinical skill experience, um, as we go. But I just feel like when I feel into the reality is that there's about 60% of the grievances that come from the Department of Regulatory Agencies in the state of Colorado are, and in general, I think, are sexual in nature. So what that says to me is that there is a problem with how we relate to intimacy in and dynamics of power and contact and connection in the intersubjective field. And so I feel really fierce and invested in being able to develop a way of relating with love unapologetically that is um yeah that's grounded and honest and like brings it in instead of has it sort of shadowing and lurking and coming through in a lots of sideways ways.
You
Yeah.
know, and I feel in my experience working with you, it is ultimately that love that is healing. And
Yeah.
there is a way that you are, I don't know, open to that, expressing that. But I feel like actually, from my experience, there's like a resonant field that you're supporting me to step into myself
Yeah.
of my own love, which was there's there of that entire experience that I wrote about. And I think for me is so much a key of then how do you have relational fulfillment amidst these legacies of trauma that most of us carry. And there's something that I've been really exploring with you around tone, and something that
Yeah.
I want to speak to it about because that's a lot to do with boundary. Because what I just heard you say is that you figured out the way to be toned and boundaried so you can actually share fucking love and actually
Exactly.
even do that in a professional clinical way. So I'm curious, like, what is going on there in your experience and like a little bit of just like some of the threads of your own journey? Because I think for me, realizing, oh, I am separate has been huge to actually being able to step towards love. And that's in some ways, somebody that wants to build a commune, et cetera, being separate has been kind of a radical idea.
Right, right. Like the value of differentiation in actually finding a way to be ultimately with. Yeah. Can you make the question a little bit more specific?
Yeah, yeah. My question would be, how do you as a guide and a therapist and a human in general, whether it's professional or even with your son or your husband, like how do you experience that experience of tone of like I have me, and how do you come back to that when your stuff is coming up? Because I think whether it's me in a partnership or you as a therapist, the rubber meets the road when our stuff comes up, our material comes up, and it's like, ooh, those boundaries get blurred, and all of a sudden I'm triggered. And actually, am I even me, or am I me 35 years ago? And like, what is your process in your own body, in your own personal practice when that happens?
Well, I mean, the reality is that locating in my body is it feels kind of rudimentary to speak to what it is to actually locate in my sensations, but that's it's like it's actually revolutionary. I mean, if you want to have control over somebody, scare them out of their body, but come back to your body and actually identify what is inarguably true in the experience of being here, and you've got power. You have choice. You have location, capacity. And so that for me has been revolutionary in terms of me not going into like all kinds of merged, codependent, hyper controlled places, and to be able to actually identify what is inarguably true in my body and actually be with that. And you alluded to tone, the whole tone spectrum that we work with, which is this, the experience of tone feels like the middle way, the place where the one eye in, one eye out happens, the oscillation happens, where I consider that tone is the amount of effort it takes to actually complete a task well and in a healthy way. And with hypotone being a little too little tone and hypertone being a little too much tone to actually complete the task well. So, like, do you have a question?
Well, I think what it's bringing up to me in this is really
Yeah.
what is your definition then of healing? Because I'm sensing that like, oh, tone. Like I think some people feel that healing is I'm gonna heal all my shit and then I can just be in the total flow and I can finally let go. And then, of course, that's seemingly not what it is. But like, what as a therapist, somebody in the business of healing, if that's even
Mm-hmm.
what you would say, like, what is your definition of what healing is, or what moving to a I don't know, state or integrated place is where people are capable of love and healthy relationship or relational fulfillment, as I named it on this talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the experience of tone and what I just said around, like, I think that actual mental health is about being at choice, is about being at choice in our nervous systems, being at choice in our own bodies, and knowing how to express and communicate from that place. It's not about Shangri-La. It's not about this, it's going to be like bliss. It's like I'm going to wake up and I'm going to feel more and I'm going to be here more and I'm going to have choice in how I relate and engage.
Is is healing then, or that therapeutic path, is that different for you than the spiritual path? And how is that played out in your own life?
So, yeah, this is a holy question. I think about like how I came to this work, and it's whatever, a circuitous path. There's um is I feel like I came into this life particularly with sort of a propensity for profound sensitivity and fierce capacity. I just feel like that's what's true. And then I grew up in southern Maine, on 7 acres of land, and like steeped in nature. Not I didn't have any screens. There was no phone, the phones, there was no television. I didn't, until I was 15 years old, I wasn't sort of, I wasn't around TV. Um, and I was born, my parents are amazing human beings. They're recovering Catholics. They were hippie back to the landers, but there was a ton of love, a lot of control, and a lot of criticism. And that was hard for my sensitive soul, but there was a ton of love and a ton of creativity and not a lot of talk of spirit and not a lot of talk of God, not a lot of talk of the unseen realms. And so I was vibing in this space and really informed by it in a huge way. And then I had a really rude awakening in the experience of school and friendship. And so I had, it's like when I think about the streams, it's like those streams I've already said. And then there's another stream of like profound bullying in my young junior high time, like profound sense of rejection and disconnection that like broke my heart to the core, that my folks didn't totally know how to hold or care for me. And then this incredible investment in creativity. And I became an athlete, a short distance sprinter, and a dancer. And then I went to, college and tried to keep being a professional, like an athlete there. And that was like terrible. And so I just dove into my liberal arts education and found modern dance. And that opened me up in an incredible way. And I got married and divorced really young. So I got married I got married and we moved to Boulder. And I got divorced 2 years later. And that was like dark night of the soul, like huge crash of my worldview.
And this is so beautiful. And I say I get really touched when you're talking about the bullying part. So just,
Mhm.
yeah, giving a beat for that in my own heart because I had that experience. I'm sure many of
Yeah.
us in the call. And I'm curious. So, Dark Night of Soul, your first marriage collapsed, but were you already aware that were you already tracking the impacts of those things from your childhood and your need for a relational view, or was it kind of like you were just young, living the path, expanding, and then that Dark Night of Soul was the first time you were like, oh shit.
Yeah, I was like I was awake to being a seer. I was awake to being a witness. And also that was a little bit shut down in my young life. Like it had certain places where it was getting expanded and other places where it was getting, like my mother, we would go because they're New Yorkers, so we would go, our vacations were to go to New York City, and I would be on the subway just like my like big dark almost black eyes in my head just like taking everything in. I could remember everything that I saw and I would report back on it, and my mother and father were just like, we had a code. It was DS, like don't stare, don't stare. And I was, and now the irony is like I'm like, I'm gonna see you. Like, I'm gonna see you. It's as big as I got. Like, you wanna step in front of me, I'm gonna see you. Like, I'm gonna see you full on. So I came round to meet it, but so I was just sort of like I was it was like burgeoning, and I was like getting my ass kicked toward the end of, in college and toward the end of college, and then this like big opening with movement and dance and embodiment and art making and studying art history and all these pieces, and then this sort of love affair experience that was like deeply soulful and beautiful, and this big move away from family and big differentiated moment to to start my own work. And I had said, I'm not going to go to graduate school until I want it with every fiber of my being. It's just too energetically and financially expensive to do anything else. So then what happened was when things started to crumble and we were just sort of like cradling each other's dysfunction and didn't have enough skills to like fucking get it right back on the road, that loss was like the ass kicker. And I started working with a therapist who had gone through the transpersonal program at Naropa, and I was dancing with a bunch of people who were in the somatic program at Naropa. And so I was like, hark, like what's happening at Naropa? And I started to do this really potent, important work and hang out in my own void, in my own falling, in my own terror. And then I oriented into the program eventually, and it completely changed my life. And the course of my work opened up. And in the early 2000s, I then also did a psychedelic journey, which gave me a felt sense of love and self-love and the experience of being held and with a felt sense that I think, it's lasted. It's lasted. It just was like, poof. and and I was just like, oh my God, how, like, this felt sense is the thing that everyone needs to be connected to in order to be able to feel spirit, to feel love, to feel like right livelihood, to feel to be in withness. So that's, I've been in a process of, and I have my clients to thank for it too, that I've been just with my head down for 30 years in this work, learning about what it is to be with and what is required to actually support suffering, to ameliorate in the face of contact with other.
What is it for suffering to ameliorate in the face of contact with the other?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I'm answering your question
Yeah,
around.
it's okay. We can just go slow. So I'm still holding that question about spirit, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
threads I want to tug
Great.
on. But just I want to pause on that last thing you said because yeah, I'm also curious because I think about this a lot. I do therapeutic work in the world in a different way than you. I'm not a licensed psychotherapist, but I lead initiation rites. I hold a lot of different containers I sit
Mhm.
with. And for me, it's always a question of like, well, what is my theory of healing? What is my theory of change? And I feel like you were just tugging at it and you shared some of it in your own journey. But I'm wondering if that, especially that last thing you said around being with like how do you and what did you learn? If you also could break down a bit, like you use his words transpersonal, which is like I want to believe I'm smart, but then you say it and I'm like, wait, what does that actually mean? Like, what is transpersonal counseling and what is somatic psychotherapy as opposed to other kinds? And how does that
Mhm.
all relate to the path you found of healing yourself and what you believe is supportive of the clients you're like with?
You're asking me these questions are just like there's like 17,000 directions I could go, but okay.
That's my style.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Okay, I'm just gonna choose one. I mean, essentially, I very simply define somatic psychotherapy as a form of psychotherapy that uses the body, movement, and body-based awareness as the primary form of intervention, and posits that all lived experience happens in and through the body. So if you want to learn how to set a boundary, you want to learn how to feel a feeling, you want to learn about a yes, you want to learn about a no, you want to learn about a maybe, you gotta check in with the body. You want to connect with a felt sense of spirit. You gotta, because all lived experience happens in and through it, until we're not here anymore, we're using the body as the ground. So, and I don't know that much about the transpersonal realms, but it's essentially, I feel like it's in service to that which holds us, accessing that which holds us for support, developing relationship with that which holds us in order to be here more fully.
And then as far as how this, well,
Yeah,
I feel like what I'm doing, Leah, is like, this is what I'm realizing I'm like my psyche trying to do is like trying to lay almost like a ecology around your work and
yeah,
our work, so then we can go deeper and create some shared language. So actually, before I go back to that definition of healing, I'm curious about your relationship with the word soul.
yeah,
I have many friends I see in this call that are in this soul work, people influenced by Bill Plotkin. I speak about it all the freaking time. My basis of my work is around soul initiation, and I truly believe in this moment, and something I didn't believe maybe 5 years ago is the freaking necessity of bridge building and getting out of our little silos of our whatever speak it is in our little enclave. Um, and so I didn't hear you use that word. And you're somebody I see who's deeply ensouled, doing her fucking work, like living your medicine. And I don't think you got there in the same way I did, or even the way I'm holding other people. So like, what does soul mean to you? And is that like, in terms of when you're helping people, is that something you're looking for? Like, are they connected to their soul? Are they living from their soul mission? Like, is that even in your lexicon, or how do you relate to that?
mm-hmm. So you're sort of asking like, how do I experience soul?
Yeah. And how does that play into your body of work or how you approach another human being?
Mhm. I mean,
Uh,
absolutely. I'm looking for and tracking soul and connection. And if I were to say like what I feel like I think soul is, it's like the life force, um, the love force, the life force that exists within me and it expands to bridge to other and to spirit. And it's sort of like the holding space for spirit in the body.
yeah. Ooh, I love that. Yeah. And there's something about deeply belonging self that I feel in that. And I feel you talked about the void and your own capacities to avoid, and I wrote about that. And I feel there's something in soul, like that's the place where we can sit with that because we're actually comfortable in our separation or our differentiation, not as a punishment of existence, but as the great opportunity.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
a- and it's interesting because in my work, and it's just fun. I think I'm asking this because I think I'm continually in my own updating. There's a lot I've learned around like people finding vision and being contacted by this like otherworldly soul place that supports how they orient, how they locate themselves, to use language you use in terms of the greater ecology of life. And it seems like your path, like when did you know you were going to become a therapist and like and give this medicine? 'Cause it feels though you told it was just very kind of like you didn't necessarily have to do a lot of seeking. It just kind of happened. But I'm curious about that and your own experience of that and how you've seen that in others. Maybe if people are even struggling, because I do say when people are living from soul, I do find relational fulfillment seems to be easier. So that's also why I'm asking it in the context of this greater talk.
Yeah, well, I felt like the experience of all the experiences I sort of laid out sort of brought me to the edge of a certain kind of accountability to my soul.
Mm.
And and
Like say, yeah, say like more. Give me a example
I
of
mean,
that.
it was absolute that sort of dark night of the soul ending. I felt like I was dying. And and I just got courageous about dying to it. Like the all of the ache, all of the pain, and just actually turning into the sensation and coming down from all the stories and all the content drama and actually really locating in that falling in.
And was somebody guiding you in that, or was that like an intuitive? Okay, somebody was
Yes,
guiding you to be like, get out of the stories, get out of the external blame, and just fucking feel.
that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Because that's
And it was, I mean, the honest truth is like when I started getting going through the program and getting educated around becoming a professional psychotherapist, and I got my ass kicked through the program. It was like transformational. And the reality is I was like, oh, this is the soul call.
mhm.
Like, and it did flow. It did flow. And I worked with adjudicated youth in the Denver system and got my ass kicked. I faced my anger and my fear like never before. I worked with the survivors of the Columbine shooting so doing violence prevention in the schools. And then I was like, okay, I got a corner on the market on trauma and pain and, you know, how about what's possible, what else is possible here, and I dove into more of my own psychotherapy. I managed a flower shop. I like danced like crazy. And then, and then I opened a private practice and I did that while I was working at Naropa. And I just have been like apprenticing to it all and loving having a chance to see and to have this unabashed like use of that facility to see and be with and to help repair the wounds around those things. So there has been a certain degree of flow there. And it was hard earned. It's not for the faint of heart, that path, of course.
I'm just having the memory of you said to me one time in a session that I have the corner on the market of intellectualizing my emotions or experience, and which is totally
Yeah.
true. And then I'm really also laughing because here I am making a profession of that kink of mine. Um,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
um, and when I'm curious, there's so many things I'm curious about. So this is my ADHD brain, which I love, and just tracking it all. And I want to tracking the question around like spiritual path. Um, and I something else I want to ask you, and I'll trust I'll come back. But the thing I want to ask you to really dig into is because this thing around stories. I feel like the kind of shadow of the soul path, which is why I'm speaking to my audience now, the audience here, is this propensity to make meaning. And people are like,
Yeah.
oh, you have to understand and make meaning. Like, and there's something that can be for me has been really healing, like because of this childhood thing that's giving me these gifts, and now I have this service in the world, and like that's fucking cool. And I think you've really shown me the limit of that. But I'm curious, not from like the theory of it, but in your own experience, was there a time when you had to self reflect and connect the dots of like, oh, the way I was raised and how that related to me being bullied, like linked to the way I showed up in that first marriage that was part of that dysfunction? Like, was that process of dot connecting story making relevant or necessary in your own liberation journey?
Um, n- I mean, of course. And also, the truth is, not really. Like yes. And what is actually supported liberation is less of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Less
Question
of
is
that
you play.
anchoring in the
Yeah.
story, in the cognitive material, in the lining it up in that
Uh,
linear, like this happened, then that happened, then, and returning and returning and returning again. And it also may be that developmentally now I'm not, I'm not like, I'm working through a lot of that. I'm not oriented toward my young life as much anymore. Um, so I don't want
right.
to dismiss that as relevant or important,
Yeah, because
but
in my
really my
experience,
liberation, yeah.
yeah, what it's really curious for like me, and again, I feel like we're both in this hard task in this moment of sussing out some terrain and some maps, and the map is not the territory.
Territory.
Consciousness is constantly evolving in a like newness. So we don't want to get like, oh, that map, that's the way. And I know for myself, parts work, or I guess to bring it to home to the point of this talk in a way of the relational fulfillment amidst a legacy of trauma, recognizing for myself at a moment in my life, some of what was happening now that was so painful and the stories I create like wasn't really just happening now. It was like these old, younger parts coming
Mm.
up. Like there was a journey of that, but I'm curious. Like there's a way I feel like that can be a crutch in somebody's journey. Um, and what I'm hearing from you is like, yeah, maybe you can just fucking feel. And do you have to recognize, oh, this is old? And because I feel like there has been a place of orientation of like, oh, there's stuff with my mom I should look at. I can intentionally drive my car of consciousness into that lane. And so I'm just curious in your perspective as a healer, given your own journey, what you like know now, like how much is that something you want to support people in, or is that maybe a not necessary step and there's a more just like direct way to the, I don't know, integration of trauma or to the place where trauma isn't totally inhibiting relational fulfillment now? Because that's typically what's happening when people want help. They're like, my trauma or my shit is in the way of me feeling fulfilled now.
John, your questions. Holy shit. Okay. So what I can say is in my journey, for example, because one of the main ways I was parented was through kind of control and criticism, in addition to love. I developed a profound capacity for self-criticism. Profound. Like like life-threatening life-threatening capacity for self-criticism. And I had to get with that. But what but and so that is also part of the arc of my journey is I didn't I actually needed to not go headlong into understanding the critic. I actually needed to interrupt it.
Yeah.
I just actually needed to
Mm.
hand her a cup of tea and ask her to sit the fuck down and take a break and not engage my cognitive coping strategy to parts it out and learn more. And I like got it, corner on that market, as, as I like to say, like full on. And part of what it's like, what is left when you're not yammering? Like, what was left when I'm not yammering at myself? It's like, so I developed insane perfectionism, insane control strategies, insane, to try to like work around. And ultimately, the vulnerability in my body and my feelings of the sensation in the present moment is actually the way home to myself, to spirit, to what's actually happening here, to it's just so much simpler. I even feel like emotion language can be lazy sometimes, where it's like, I'm feeling fear. It's like, how do you know? What is it to actually come into relationship with the felt sense of what you call fear? And then that's the thing that, and I'm having, as I'm talking, like these memories of my own moments where I've been shaking in my own boots, just dialing it into the experience of being in my body and meeting what's there. And that's been the way to healing and liberation for me. So I think
So,
yeah, so the piece around, and again, not to dismiss the power of story and the importance of meaning making, because that's all happening in and through the body too.
yeah,
The but most of us in this modern world have a corner on the cognitive coping strategy market and could do way less of that. And so when I'm working with people, that's often the radical thing. Is just like, yes, you can tell the story. Yes, I can get a lay of the land and you can tell me where you come from. That's responsible. But do I need it to work with you? Absolutely not.
yeah,
Do I need it to help you make change in your life? No.
yeah. Oh, there's so many good questions from here, but I'm going to come back to something more specific in it, which is then I mean, even language can start to get faulty in these places, but trauma exists. Most people carry it, like fragmented parts of psyche, stored, stuck emotional energy that didn't get processed. I've certainly been on an evolutionary journey of my own relationship with and understanding of trauma and how to move through it or with it. I remember once this indigenous teacher I had, Archon Lushwala, who holds this ceremony community in New Mexico that I've gone to. He was actually talking to me as a Jewish person. He was like, maybe, I don't know, I'm gonna repeat what he says. Maybe it's a little tropey, but he's like, Jewish people, you're a little like addicted to your grief, your trauma. And this way of like getting stuck in the story of it, and this is real. And for me, that was linked to a belief that I had to process every piece of trauma, that like I literally had to have my body in some ways
Mhm.
cathartic through all of that trauma. And
Mhm.
what I'm curious about is that in that session that we had that I wrote about, part of the fear of going into the void, of just that stillness, of really coming into the body is like, well, who the fuck wants to go into their body when there's all this stored trauma, not just in my life, but the legacies of colonization and patriarchy and yeah, all the things.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so of course I'm fucking scared, or like I don't want to go in there. And then because I was like, I'll have to feel it all, then I have to shake for 5,000 years and cry and vomit or whatever. And then you said something about fear. You were like, yeah, just feel it and imagine it just evaporating through your skin. And I was like, I remember that moment being like, it can just be that simple. It can just evaporate through your
Ah.
through your skin. But something I did get somewhere, and it wasn't like all my fear was ever gone. But I'm curious about that in your relationship to the stored energy of trauma, and like what is your understanding from your own life and as a therapist of how people move through it and can, and like what are those steps, and is it a chipping at the glacier for 1,000 years, or yeah.
Oh God, no. I'm like, I'm a fan of miracles, I gotta say. Like, I'm just like, what if it could be simple? How simple can we make it? How much can we break this down? And basically, the way I see trauma, too much, too soon, too fast. that requires a strategy of some kind to manage the experience. And yes, that can happen over generations, and we get into these patterns of dealing with trauma in the body in certain ways. It has helped me so much to think of it simply, to actually be like, so if it's too much, too soon, too fast, then, and I believe like you never have to go back into those rooms. You never have to chip away at the glacier ad infinitum. You can just be here now and feel the way it's asking to, it's sort of like you can no longer go on in a whole-souled way without that piece you left behind for a refuge in so-called love at the time. And now we're gonna go grab that piece. We're gonna get in there and be near that experience of coming back in and vibrating in the fire, resonating in the fear, opening in the expansion. And with fear specifically, it's often like a buzz in the body, and it has this, when I went through my own wrestling with fear, that was a big piece for me. It was like, oh, it's just, I can just like, what if I, because it wasn't in a spot, it wasn't in a specific space in my body. It was like everywhere. And so the option to come back and reclaim that in myself, my ability to be with my experience, was about giving it permission to just open out off of my entire body.
Which there's something in this for me, and people ask about tone, of the individuation differentiation path, which I would say my framework is like, oh, if this is ancestral or it came from our parents, like maybe I don't have to feel it all. Maybe it's not mine. And there's a way of just letting it go versus being like, oh, and the part of I guess for me, to speak my own experience, that is like hooked into or kind of gets off in this awkward way of like, I'm so self-important because of my trauma, so let me just hang out in it. And what I'm hearing and what I'm also experiencing is what I'm actually after is behavioral change or relational change. I could just go to practice that, practicing being
Exactly.
in a love
Yes.
field versus, and I think of it kind of as this metaphor right now, how I'm with AI, where I'm often feel like I'm trying to use AI to do something else, but then the meta layer of using AI is taking as much time as it is to do the other thing. I feel like, oh, going into my trauma often is like, what I really want is just a change in my relational life or my experience of being human. So maybe I don't need to go to this whole other meta place to get there. I can just hang out in the practice of being here and
Yes.
being with in any moment, which for me is, I think, some of what that love field is. It's just being with whatever continues to arise. It's not that it's forever peaceful. It's just that, oh, meeting the next thing, creating space for it and welcoming it without it being this projection outward, which is often how we get in our relational tangles, where it's to be like, oh, because you did this. And then all of a sudden,
Right. Right. Yeah, I forget what it is that you said exactly, but it was like there's a way that we do get precious about our thinkiness, our thinkativity. It's like we get precious about our stories. We get, and I think that part of what somatic work does is it challenges us into the possibility of what exists in the present moment when you're actually just with what's there, you know? And I'm not saying I'm not a fan of thinking and meaning making. Also, I love it's just that what we don't get practice with, which is what I'm interested in helping, it's like that hour of time is like, let's go for miracle. Like, let's go for embodied experience. Let's go for the practice of what happens when I'm with my heart and I'm asking you, I'm with myself, asking you to be with your body and God, basically.
Yeah, which brings me to a question I want to come back to, but there's one more first, and we'll go for like 7 more minutes, and then we'll open up to the audience for questions too.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to come back to that spirit question at the end. Let me find, I had another question now. About just to really define for the audience, I want to ask you about it because for me, it was profound and I've heard it and I brought in this Rilke quote. Uh, you know, Rilke was this great poet and he wrote something in his letters to a young poet around like the highest task of love is to protect the solitude of the other so you can see them against the entire sky. And you said something to me that really just rang true and hurt. And it really called out my deep, and so many people want union, like cosmic union, like it's the sacred feminine masculine union, like it's the whole rage in my circle of people, I feel like. But you were like, nah, that like hole at the core of existence of being a separate self, that ain't gonna go away. And the best you can do in relationship is love is try to get somebody next to you to who's willing to feel their hole, their void, their kind of empty, separate self expanse while you're feeling yours. And then be in that shared experience of, in some ways, the separation of body and ego and self. So I'm just
And
curious.
isn't that on some level potentially ecstatic union?
Well, that's what I'm curious about. Like, what is your, based on what I said, like, what is your perspective on like how healthy relationship actually works and like how love in relationship actually is like, is that kind of the framework that you're operating in? If you were to like give forth a map to others, like what is your cosmology around healthy relationship?
Well, I think it's connected to this, like if I am actually located in that and willing to be in that in that void, in the reality of the experience that happens in my distinct separate body experience, in my energy, then I am actually available for getting close to another person also in that and sharing that reality together, keeping each other company, being in pleasure, being in the the interpersonal effectiveness required to communicate well from that place. And it,
Then,
yeah.
well, then my other question, this is a really potent question for me, is then what is the role of definition and like structure? Because for me, part of the void is also that reality of like, there's always, we're not certain what's going to happen. I think there is some evolutionary arc I've been in of just being in the like, I'm down to be with whatever comes. And the more I try to control and create that certainty, that often can block me from being with. And, we aren't just undifferentiated souls. We are embodies. There is
Yes.
structures. And so like in your own relational life, I know that you're married or like, you're a therapist. Obviously there's that people are asking about tone. Like, what is your relationship to definition and like we're this to each other and these are our agreements and like how to have that because that supports tone, which somebody asked me if you
Yes.
could also define, but how to do that without crowding out the ultimate void uncertainty, which is that wellspring of creation and aliveness. Like, what is your experience lived in that, and how would you like support others in orienting towards that?
Well, I feel very invested in a balance of structure and boundaries and clarity and agreements and communication um and and sort of orienting toward shared reality through the channels that we have as human beings. It's not like I'm speaking largely also in for our intents and purposes here to, I mean, it's a little bit hard to straddle the like what happens in the session space and what I'm looking to cultivate and support people with to have more access to and more balance with present moment embodied experience. And and then from that place, like, yes, we are different. We are differentiated. We are separate. So it matters what I'm a yes to and what I'm a no to, and what I want and what I don't want, and what I need and what I'd like, and how to negotiate that. So I I think that's very important in the arc of what we're talking about here.
Okay. Follow-up question, then we'll get to the
Yeah.
final one before I open up everybody else. What's tricky about relationship, partnership, even friendship is it's not differentiated in the way like a clinical relationship is, but yet you're touching up against each other's stuff. And you see that in each other in your mirrors. And there can be a potency, I think, in, supporting each other. And yet, to raise my own flag of vulnerability and relational dysfunction, my pattern has been to try to, therapize my partners because I'm also a seer and I can see so clearly. And yet there's like it's lacking my own vulnerability. But I'm
Mhm.
curious, even you in your lived experience of relationship, whether it's friendship or partnership, like how do you get into those places of really supporting each other? What does that actually look like for you when you're not in this clear therapeutic context, but you're in the ground of real relationship in your life and like shit's coming up in your husband, you see her, he sees it in you, and like how do you actually navigate that is generative and where you actually can lean in to being held and supported?
I mean, at the risk of sounding simplistic here, it's like it's a for me, it's about vulnerability and surrender, and about
And
doing less, trying to convince less, trying to rest more, and to be in that profound riddle of letting go without giving up, and to
yeah,
access my body as the structure for that path and practice.
yeah, yeah, totally. Also love somebody that's wrote, could it be Josh trying to understand intellectually what cannot be understood intellectually? 100%. I mean, just to say to all of you, for me, that is the game of language. And honestly, being a human that has this kind of cognition, we cannot define any of it in words, but there's a fun fucking game in the juicy exchange of playing. And that for me is like, it's also that love feels like we can touch these moments where we feel connected or feel in union while also recognizing we are ultimately separate. And at a deeper level, ultimately, there's something in that game. So, yes, that's part of the way my
Yes.
my psyche loves to play that game. Okay, final question, and we're going to open it up. Is this all the same as a spiritual path for you
For me,
personally?
yes.
It is.
Yes.
This like everything we're saying, like this is also the path of liberation of healing is to you also the spiritual path, whatever that even means.
For me, yes, whatever that means.
Okay, great. And have you found in your life, is there any other kind of anchor of spiritual path? I don't know, like relationship to God in some kind of, I don't know, cosmology or practice that also is part of that? Or is it just like I'm relationally present and that's the practice?
I mean, that's been a like a boast and a bane for me. Like the fact that I wasn't seeded with a cosmology of a lingo around religion, around spirituality, around these things it's like it's been sort of a free fall, and love and the felt experience of that has been my holy way. And and I there's been times where I've wished I had more ballasts of, and I will say that, various contemplative traditions have been incredibly supportive for me. Contemplative practices connected to meditation. I have, advanced study and practice in the form of authentic movement, where I'm really looking at my individual experience in relationship to the collective, both in energy and the unseen realms and in relationship to people. So I've been studying the experience of energy and what actually stillness in relationship to movement is. And that all has been a holy walk for me and a part of what I'm currently making of spirit and spirituality and giving myself permission to find even my tears holy in this dance.
There's something about your simplicity and heart and how that relates to your authenticity, which is why I so am grateful to be in your presence and work with you.
Thank you, John.
I'll pause my questioning here.
Mm-hmm.
Open it up to the collective. If you all want to raise your hand, great. People are doing it. If you want to raise your hand, that's a really good way to organize it since we're on Zoom. Or you could post a question in the chat and I'll try to look for it. Welcome questions and comments. But if you want to dare to raise your hand, I will bring you on unmiked. So, okay. Shayla, if you want to come off, mute and go for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, for bringing us this beautiful opportunity.
Mm.
I feel deeply delighted and nourished by being in your presence, Leah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, in many, many ways.
Mm.
And I would love two questions. I don't think I fully understand what tone is, which is interesting. I haven't heard that word a lot, in spite of all my experience. And then I would love to just hear you say a little bit about what you spoke about as I heard it as kind of a living koan in relationship, how to surrender without giving up,
Mm-hmm.
how to
Mm-hmm.
let go without giving up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so say more about what your question is about that, just for me to speak more to it.
Because I think we have, it's very easy to misunderstand what it is to surrender in relationship, and we give ourselves away in ways that are not optimal at all.
Yeah, great. Yes. Okay. I think I understand. Yeah. And it's actually connected to tone, so I can start there. So yeah, the definition of tone that I'm sort of working with is and I use in session, I use the experience of a handshake as a place to practice the tone spectrum. Tone being the amount of strength or engagement with the body to engage with and complete a task. Not too much, not too little. So if we're engaging in a handshake, you know the handshakes where it's like kind of a hypertonic, where it's too much tone. It's more than what's required to actually make contact. And there's really no contact that happens because of that gripping. And then hypo on the other end, it's like if I shake your hand and it's like a dead fish, that's a hypotonic handshake, not enough tone to actually make contact on either end. So the toned middle way is, how do I stay with me enough to hold your hand where you can feel me bringing my heart into the moment and making contact and connecting with your body, and you're doing the same thing.
Oh, so I would I can feel that as part of what I work with, which is can we open to the experience in which I feel you feeling me?
That's right.
Because if the tone is too little, that doesn't happen. And if the tone is too strong, that circuit of I feel you feeling me gets disrupted.
That's right. That's right. And so then in relationship to letting go without giving up, that toned middle way is my work to actually be with to actually I orient towards surrender as a essentially shifting out of this two eyes out
Mm,
into a one eye in, one eye out meets two eyes in experience of I'm really I'm really closer to me than I am to to the out experience
mm.
and to what I find there. And that enables me to essentially step down from the unbearability of trying to control the universe.
Thank you. I just that was perfect. And I want to give space to the other people who are here.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much
very
for your
much.
question. Yeah,
Thanks,
beautiful.
Shayla. Helpful. Okay, other people. Does anyone else want to dare to raise their hand or just come off mute and ask something? Or just share what was touching you. Can be a good way in to a dialogue. Good chance to be engaged. Also, I saw a question from Amarensk as well, but it's not a question that Amarensk asked a question about Christianity taking us away from the simplicity of the body. And my curiosity would be if there's a more vulnerable question under that. So I want you to sit with that because I feel like it could put us in a terrain that's pretty, I know I'm a pretty heady person, but even like very heady. So I want to ask you, I'm going to have Misa come on and share, but then if there's a question underneath that question, maybe is more vulnerable coming from your body, I'd be happy to come back to it. Or if there's something else there that I could understand better what you're trying to get at and how it serves us now in your own inquiry. Misa, come off mute.
Just also want to echo, I think it was Shayla, just really appreciating the space that's being held. And Leah, for you, the way that you model this very grounded and centered authenticity, I think was one of the words John mentioned. And John, to your point about being vulnerable, I guess I will vulnerably share my question. John, in the piece that you wrote, you talked about attachment style. And that's one of my vulnerabilities, is being anxiously attached or preoccupied. And I'm trying to learn how to relate to other people from a more authentic and centered place instead of the codependence place that comes out of, you know, the insecure, anxiously attached style.
Sure.
And then also how that's complicated by having, like, I'm also autistic, I'm ADHD, complex PTSD, disabled, like, so I am dependent. I have high support needs. And how do I relate to other people from this place of dependence, like over dependence in some ways, without it being codependent? And how do I do this from an empowered place rather than a helpless and powerless place?
Oh, Such a good question.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you've essentially just in laying out that question really bellied up to a new bar, it feels like, like that there's like such wisdom in that question. And I feel like it's like I can sense the benefit of being in your experience of your body and what's true in there in the face of all the conditions you spoke to, and that's not that's absolutely relevant. The simple experience of your embodied experience, felt description of being there. And I think what in the face of anxious attachment, in the face of the fear that comes up in the space between, like like what's left is actually staying near your adult experience of that feeling unbearable when it feels unbearable. And actually, but even the word unbearable is like, I mean, it's something I would say about my own experience at times, but it's like being brave enough to go toward the unbearability and to potentially be surprised what happens. I mean, in John's article, we went headlong into the fear, like die to it level going toward. And what lived underneath what he found underneath that was stillness. And the reality is that the felt experience of our emotional body, 30 to 90 seconds usually max. 90 seconds is a big ride. And if it's hanging on longer than that, it's a mind thing usually. So reps in the rep gym of that is like the way home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the continual training I've been in, Italy, of just being vulnerable uh again and again to what is it I'm here in this moment, and
Yeah.
bringing all those layers. Um,
Hmm.
there's a question Jason asked around that specific experience, Leah, you just alluded to, and also thinking this like your kind of side of when I was like, shit, this is uncomfortable. I'm feeling. I think I started feeling attachment anxiety, Misa, very similar to what you feel. Like I can run pretty anxious, and it's just fucking awful. And especially when I'm in like a breakup or like some separation, it's like I'm fucking going to die. This is like being a baby with my caregiver AWOL or something. That's a memory field that comes up. And um, yeah, you guided me, and then I got to this place of stillness of like just I don't know. It's kind of just what happened. And then underneath it, I found this bright pulse of love. Um, which is like the most tripped out I've been sober maybe ever in my life. Which I also love. Like you had this one psychedelic experience. I've had probably 1,000. Maybe I don't need to go back to the like well so often because I found it sober. Um, but yeah,
Awesome.
what was your experience in guiding that, and how can people get there? Maybe it's like a silly question to ask, I feel in this moment, but Jason asked it. In the chat, and I'm curious if there's anything you can share about that, of like how we
What's
all
the
find it,
question?
like
Yeah.
how we all find our like way to that God
Hmm.
love in the like void. Like if people want to do that for themselves, they want to touch that. Even what you said you touched in your psychedelic journey, that love that's underneath, that I feel like is where you guided me to, or we somehow got my psyche there.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, it's sort of like like a willingness to be sort of like a not precious and kind of be like a sensation warrior, you know, like to go toward the thing we would rather not go toward. And I just am, I mean, the truth is, it's not like like you didn't have to do that in without love. Like the love field that I'm holding, the you know, the sort of non-precious bravery that I have because I've done this also myself and with a lot of people over a long period of stretch of time. I'm like, I know how to hold you while you're getting nearer to you. So it wasn't in a vacuum. And then that that willingness to say, what if you were brave enough to let it have you? Like, as if it's like turning toward it, like, if I have to do this every day for the rest of my life, if I have to, if this, it's sort of like radical willingness and acceptance to be like, yeah, because the sensation is really different than, I'm not saying, what if you had to think that thing every day? I'm saying, what if you had to turn into this thing that's uncomfortable, that's hot, that's tight, um, that's uh, inflamed? What if you had to say yes there? Like, it's like I'm midwifing that passage, that portal. And that is so often the key. Like, I've worked with people who spent decades avoiding a thing that happens in 60 seconds, like fear that they've never felt, sublimated, strategized. And in 60 seconds, they're like, wait, that's the thing that I thought was so toxic and bad and created a whole, you know, uh, navigation around my entire life. Oh, that's it? So it's really about this courage to not be so precious about the places that are fucking uncomfortable. I mean, that's really what I'm doing in my work, is helping people be more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I
So sweet.
learned so much about the reality of that for myself through being in this work.
Mm.
And it's very generative and beautiful for me because of that.
So simple and so profoundly, and just I want to just underline as a tag to that, just the getting underneath the stories and into the body. There's even a session recently where I was like, I feel unsafe with this person. And you're like, are you actually unsafe? Like, to be unsafe, a lot of things would have to happen. And it was like, oh, I'm actually really scared. And even that
Yeah.
layer of like psychic difference, how that allowed me to get into my body and how unconscious that story was. So there's so
Yeah.
much there.
So much
And
there. I think that, you know, like if we hang out, I'm very interested in the difference between an actual feeling and a concept. And safety feels like on some level a concept. And I have a lot of things to say about that. But basically it's like, if I stay in, I'm not safe, it's really like choice is really limited. But if I get to, I'm scared, then I'm like in my sovereign experience, and I have, and then it's like, well, then I get to make a choice. I've sort of used the example of like the parking garage after 11 p.m., one could say is unsafe, or I could just say, I'm scared to go into the parking garage after 11 p.m. And what do I need to feel not scared to do that? That actually makes me active in the experience instead of like, whoa, the unsafe parking garage. That sort of conceptual generality. Yeah.
And I want to also tag the flip side of that, which is something I get hooked into a lot, which is like the over romanticizing of something. I mean, I can try to find examples, but like that thing is going to be precious and amazing. Like I was talking about it on a trip I wanted to go on. And I was
Yes.
like, and you're like, maybe that thing will be a shit show. Like, and would you still go instead of, so there's a way we get into meaning, takes us out of our head and just coming back to the body. We're past our time that I had allotted. And so I want to acknowledge that. Maybe we can just take a breath all together before doing any hastily ending things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge to everybody, just, the experience I wrote about was in a paid professional setting with somebody of Leah's caliber. And as Leah told me, like, this is our fucking birthright. And I don't believe that's like we're dependent on that to get there. But I want to be real. That helped me. And so I want to just encourage. And part of what I'm bringing forth in the world is the greater ecology of healing and culture we're in, including paid professionals and our friends and elders and us sitting in front of our altar or out in nature or just in our fucking traffic light, like taking that breath and finding that container to get more vulnerable. So there's many ways. And I'm just so praying that we all ultimately get vulnerable to ask for help, because that's how I think, Leah, I was able to get to some place that benefit you, is like asking you for help and claiming like I can't do it just alone in this moment right now. Although I do get to practice that all the time, which is part of the bigger path.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John, for having me. This has been a
Yeah.
total.
Is there anything, Leah, you want to say by way of closing? And I'm going to post your link, and I will send everybody links to connect with Leah. And I have one final thing I want to say, but anything else, Leah, you want to say by way of just wrapping up here?
Mm. I think it's been said. I think it's been,
Right.
yeah. Just want to support. I think just a parting sort of prompt or homework is to actually give some felt inquiry to this invitational question or this poetic puzzle of what is the felt sense of love in my body, and where does it live, and how can I go there when I want to? How can I live from that place ultimately, but how can I have choice about accessing it?
Yeah. Thank you, Leah. Also acknowledge there's a question. Amidst wrote about Christianity and their path that we didn't get to. And Amidst, anybody, if you want to email me questions you have, maybe I'll forward them to Leah, see if she will respond to them at all, or we'll just save it. And I feel, Leah, truly an impulse of one is so much profound gratitude. Like, this is why I do this, like create these spaces. I don't know even why. And just thank you for showing up. And I'd love to do it again at some point in some months. I feel like there's like a bit of almost like a series waiting to happen here. There's so much more we could have touched on. So just putting that out as a naming a desire, claiming a prayer. Thank you, everybody, for showing up so vulnerably and beautifully. I posted Leah's sign up form to be on her email list, I guess, in the chat,
Mhm.
and I'll follow up with the recording of that as well, so you can be in touch with Leah. Yeah, Leah, I feel like you could somehow find like a network of therapists as epic as you to send to the world, because I know many people in my own life are like, can I work with Leah? And I'm like, dude, she's a wait list out the door. So, you all cannot work with Leah directly, probably just limits the time and space, but I trust there's other people out there that can be worked with, including myself.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing I want to say too is that like part of what um your article and your um uh invitation for this conversation has seeded in me is a bit of a nudge around actually having a little bit more public presence and a little bit more um like a way to serve a slightly greater scope, and so I'm starting to think about that in new ways, and stay tuned for the offerings.
Yes, amazing. Well,
Yeah.
grateful. My longing could be a nudge. So thank you, everybody. Blow out this candle. It's really hot. I'm gonna blow it down from here. Feeling all this love, taking a moment, and just that felt sense connecting me right now to my heart, and you all hopefully to your hearts. You all have a beautiful afternoon or evening wherever you're at, and we'll be seeing you down the road. Everybody.